They told me once about a man who changed his entire life with just 3 words. 3 simple words. The kind of words you probably said 1,000 times without ever feeling their true weight. The kind that slip through conversations like loose change falling between couch cushions. Valuable, but forgotten. But what if I told you these 3 words hold the power to completely transform your existence? That when embraced fully, whispered in silence, and allowed to penetrate the depths of your being, they become the catalyst for everything you've been searching for. I am responsible. Let those words sink in for a moment. Not they are responsible. Not circumstances are responsible. Not the economy is responsible. Not my upbringing is responsible. I am responsible. The moment you truly accept these 3 words is the moment your life begins to transform. It's the precise instant when manifestation accelerates from a crawl to a sprint. Because you see, the universe responds not to what we wish for, but to what we take ownership of. Most folks spend their entire lives looking outward for solutions to inward problems. They're waiting for permission, waiting for circumstances to change, waiting for someone to hand them the life they desire. And they'll be waiting until the dirt covers their casket, because that's not how life works. Life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you command through your actions, your beliefs, and your willingness to stand in the fire of your own creation. When you stay silent and repeat, I am responsible, something magical happens in your mind. The excuses that once seemed so valid begin to dissolve. The story you've been telling yourself about why you can't succeed starts to sound hollow. The limitations you've accepted as truth reveal themselves as nothing more than paper tigers, frightening in appearance but lacking any real substance. Consider this as eating your life right now. Every relationship, every dollar in your bank account, every pound on your body, every emotion you regularly experience, all of it is the harvest of seeds you planted through your choices. Some folks don't like hearing that. They prefer the comfort of believing they're victims of circumstance. And you know what? That belief system works perfectly. It will manifest exactly the life it's designed to create. One of perpetual victimhood, persistent struggle, and endless waiting for rescue. But you're not here for that kind of life, are you? You're here because something inside you knows there's more. Something inside you is tired of waiting. Something inside you is ready to claim the 3 most powerful words in the human experience. Let me tell you about 2 boats floating down a river. Both encounter a massive storm. On the first boat, the passengers panic, blame the captain, curse the weather, and spend their energy complaining about their bad luck. On the second boat, each passenger simply says, I am responsible, and begins bailing water, securing cargo, and working together to navigate to safety. Which boat do you think survives? Question answers itself, doesn't it? Your life is that boat, and every day brings new storms. The difference between those who thrive and those who merely survive lies in those 3 words. Now, I want to be clear about something. Taking responsibility isn't about blame. It's not about beating yourself up for past mistakes or carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. It's about claiming your power. It's about recognizing that if you created your current reality, consciously or unconsciously, you possess the power to create something different. And that, my friends, is where manifestation begins. Most people misunderstand manifestation. They think it's some mystical process where you wish hard enough for something and the universe delivers it like a cosmic mail carrier. That's not manifestation. That's fantasy. True manifestation begins with responsibility. It starts when you look at your life exactly as it is, not as you wish it were, and say, this is mine. I created this, and because I created it, I can create something else. That level of ownership is frightening. It's much easier to believe we're powerless, isn't it? Much more comfortable to think our circumstances are happening to us rather than through us and because of us. But comfort never created greatness. Comfort never manifested dreams. Comfort is the enemy of growth. Growth begins at the end of your comfort zone. It begins when you stay silent, look in the mirror and say those 3 words. I am responsible. Here's what happens when you do this consistently. Your mind, which loves efficiency, begins searching for solutions instead of problems. It shifts from why is this happening to me to what can I do about this. That single shift changes everything because it moves you from passive victim to active creator. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask yourself. Victims ask disempowering questions. Why me? When will things get better? Who's going to help me? Creators ask empowering questions. How can I turn this around? What opportunity is hidden in this challenge? What resource within me haven't I tapped yet? Those questions only emerge when you've embraced those three powerful words. Let me share something personal with you. There was a time when I didn't understand this principle. I was drifting through life, wondering why opportunities seemed to find everyone but me, why success appeared to be distributed to a select few while I remained empty-handed. The change didn't come from working harder, though that became part of it. It didn't come from learning new skills, though that too became essential. The change came from 5 minutes of silence where I finally stopped blaming everything outside of me and simply said, I am responsible. In that moment, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic like in the movies. No orchestral music swelled in the background. No montage of sudden success followed. Just a quiet, powerful knowing that from that moment forward, my life was in my hand. And that's what I'm offering you today. Not a quick fix, not a magic formula, something far more valuable. The truth that will set you free if you have the courage to embrace it. Now, some of you might be thinking, but you don't understand my circumstances. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know how unfair life has been to me. And you're right, I don't know your specific journey. But I know this, as long as you believe your circumstances define you, they will. As long as you believe your past determines your future, it will. As long as you wait for life to be fair before you take action, you'll be waiting forever. Life isn't fair. It never has been and never will be. But life is remarkably responsive to those who take responsibility. Think about that word for a moment. Responsibility. The ability to respond, not react, not complain, not blame, but respond with intention and purpose. That's your superpower. That's the key that unlocks manifestation. When you stay silent and repeat, I am responsible, you're programming your subconscious mind to look for ways you can take action. You're training your brain to see possibilities rather than problems. You're conditioning your spirit to rise to challenges rather than shrink from them. This is how mountains are moved. Not all at once, but stone by stone, with the quiet determination of someone who knows they are the architect of their destiny. Consider how differently you approach a house you own versus one you rent. When you rent, small problems are someone else's concern. A leaky faucet? Call the landlord. Peeling paint? Not your problem. But when you own that house, everything changes. Suddenly, that leaky faucet represents your money dripping away. That peeling paint becomes a reflection of your standards. Ownership changes everything. It transforms how we see, what we notice, and most importantly, what actions we take. Your life is not a rental. You own it. Every square inch, every triumph, every failure, every possibility, and every limitation. And the sooner you embrace that ownership through those three words, I am responsible, the sooner manifestation accelerates. Let's talk about acceleration for a moment. When people first discover the principles of manifestation, they often become frustrated with the pace. I'm visualizing, I'm affirming, I'm believing. Why isn't anything happening? They ask. The answer almost always lies in incomplete responsibility. They're saying the words without embodying the truth. They're affirming ownership with their lips while denying it with their actions. They're seeking results while rejecting the process that creates those results. Manifestation accelerates when responsibility becomes total, not partial, not conditional, not selective, total. Total responsibility means looking at every area of your life: health, wealth, relationship, spiritual growth, career, emotional well-being, and claiming ownership of all of it. No exceptions, no excuses, no areas where you get to say, but that's different. This doesn't mean you blame yourself for things outside your control. It means you take responsibility for how you respond to those things. There's a world of difference. A storm may not be your fault, but your preparation for it is your responsibility. Another person's actions may not be your choice, but your reaction to them is entirely within your control. The economy may rise and fall independent of your wishes, but your financial education, adaptability, and resourcefulness are your responsibility. When you stay silent and repeat, I am responsible, you're not taking on burdens you can't carry. You're claiming the power that's been yours all along. In the silence after speaking those words, something profound happens. Your mind, which abhors contradictions, begins seeking alignment. If you truly are responsible, then certain behaviors, thoughts, and choices no longer make sense. They become incongruent with your declared truth. You can't simultaneously believe, I am responsible, and continue blaming your past for your present. You can't genuinely accept I am responsible and keep waiting for someone else to fix your problem. You can't deeply embrace I am responsible and continue with habits you know are destroying your potential. This is why these three words are so transformative. They create a standard that begins eliminating everything in your life that doesn't meet it. Most people live their entire lives without ever experiencing true freedom. They think freedom means doing whatever they want whenever they want. But that's not freedom. That's impulsivity. True freedom comes from making choices aligned with your highest values and long-term. And that kind of freedom is impossible without first accepting total responsibility. When you stay silent and repeat, I am responsible, you're claiming your freedom. You're declaring independence from excuses, from blame, from the tyranny of lowered expectations. You're stating, quietly but firmly, but your life belongs to you. Not to circumstances, not to other people's opinions, not to the past, but that declaration is the foundation of all manifestation, because you cannot create what you don't first own. Think about this. Everything you want to manifest, greater wealth, vibrant health, loving relationships, meaningful work, requires you to show up differently. It requires new thoughts, new beliefs, new actions, new habits. And none of those changes will happen sustainably until you embrace those three words. Let me give you a simple example. Two individuals want to manifest better health. Both learn the same information about nutrition and exercise. Both have similar starting points. But one approaches the journey thinking, I'll try this and see if it works for me, while the other thinks, I am responsible for my health, completely and without exception. 6 months later, who do you think has transformed their body? A year later, who has maintained their results? 5 years later, who has made health a cornerstone of their identity rather than a temporary project? The difference isn't knowledge, it is an opportunity. It isn't even initial desire. The difference is ownership. The difference is responsibility. The first person's approach contains a subtle escape hatch. If this doesn't work, it's because the system failed me. The second person's approach closes all escape hatches. If this doesn't work, I'll adjust my approach until I find what does. That's the power of those three words. They close the back doors. They eliminate the escape routes. They burn the bridges back to excuse-making and blame. And that's precisely why most people avoid them. Because without excuses, there's nowhere to hide from our own potential. Without blame, we're forced to confront our own power. Without escape hatches, we must either succeed or admit we chose not to. That's a level of honesty many aren't ready for. But you are, or you wouldn't be here. When you stay silent and repeat, I am responsible, you're doing something even deeper than you might realize. You're reprogramming your identity. And identity is the invisible force governing nearly everything in your life. Identity is what you believe about yourself at the core. Not what you say you believe, but what you believe so deeply that it never occurs to you to question it. Your identity shapes your perceptions, filters your experiences, determines what actions feel natural to you, and ultimately creates the boundaries of your life. Most people try to change their results without changing their identity. They want the body of a disciplined person while maintaining the identity of someone who deserves a treat whenever they feel stressed. They want the wealth of a financially responsible person while maintaining the identity of someone who deserves luxury regardless of their balance sheet. They want the relationships of someone who communicates clearly while maintaining the identity of someone who shouldn't have to explain their needs. These contradictions can never produce the desired manifestations because your results will always align with your identity, not your wishes. When you stay silent and repeat, "I am responsible," you're initiating an identity shift at the deepest level. You're declaring that at your core, you're a creator, not a victim, an owner, not a renter, a cause, not an effect. That shift changes everything. Consider how differently you behave when you truly believe, "This is my responsibility," versus "This might become my responsibility if nothing better comes along." In the first instance, you plan carefully, you execute diligently, you evaluate honestly, you correct quickly, you persist determinedly. In the second you hesitate, you half commit, you blame circumstances for shortfalls. You abandon ship when the waters get rough. Manifestation responds to the first approach, not the second. The universe, or more accurately, the natural laws governing creation, doesn't reward wistful thinking. It responds to ownership. It responds to responsibility. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Taking total responsibility is scary. It means there's no one to blame if things don't work out. It means facing the possibility that you've been the author of your struggles all along. It means admitting that the life you have is the life you've created, consciously or unconsciously. That level of honesty requires courage, real courage, not the flashy, momentary kind that gets applause, but the quiet, consistent kind that looks in the mirror each morning and says, "I am responsible," even when every fiber of your being wants to point the finger elsewhere. But here's what makes it all worthwhile. The moment you fully embrace those three words is the moment your life truly begins. Everything before that was preparation. Everything before that was rehearsal. Everything before that was you living someone else's script. The moment you say, "I am responsible," and mean it down to your bones, is the moment you pick up the pen and begin writing your own story. And that's when manifestation shifts from theory to reality. Most teachings on manifestation focus on techniques: visualization, affirmation, vision boards, scripting. These are valuable tools, but they're secondary. The primary tool, the one that makes all others effective, is responsibility. Without responsibility, visualization becomes fantasy. Without responsibility, affirmations become lies. Without responsibility, vision boards become wish lists. Without responsibility, scripting becomes fiction. But with responsibility as your foundation, these practices transform into powerful creative forces. They become extensions of your ownership, expressions of your authorship, manifestations of your responsibility. When you stay silent and repeat, "I am responsible," you're not just saying words. You're declaring the terms of your existence. You're establishing the fundamental principle upon which your life will unfold. You're setting in motion forces that will shape everything that follows. Let me share something few people understand about manifesting. It's happening all the time, whether you're conscious of it or not. You're constantly manifesting your reality through your predominant thoughts, beliefs, words, and actions. The question isn't whether you're manifesting. The question is whether you're doing it by design or by default. Default manifestation comes from unconscious patterns, limiting beliefs, unexamined assumptions, and habitual reactions. It creates more of what you already have because it's governed by who you already are. Design manifestation comes from conscious choice, expansive beliefs, examined truths, and intentional responses. It creates what you truly desire because it's governed by who you're choosing to become. The bridge between these two forms of manifestation is, you guessed it, responsibility. Until you say, "I am responsible for your current reality," you can't access the power to create a different one. As long as your current circumstances are happening to you rather than through you, you remain locked in default manifestation, recreating variations of the same experiences over and over again. But the moment you embrace those three words, everything changes. Default manifestation gives way to design manifestation. Unconscious creation yields to conscious creation. Reaction surrenders to response. This is why staying silent and repeating "I am responsible" accelerates manifestation. It shifts you from passive recipient to active creator. It transforms you from object to subject, from effect to cause, from character to author. In that transformation lies the secret to manifesting anything you truly desire. Now, I want to be clear about some. Responsibility isn't a magic spell that instantly changes external reality. It's a principle that gradually transforms internal reality, which then reshapes your external experience. When you first begin practicing these 3 words, you might not see immediate changes in your circumstances. This leads many to abandon the practice, assuming it doesn't work. But that's like planting a seed, digging it up the next day because it hasn't produced fruit, and declaring gardening ineffective. Manifestation through responsibility follows natural laws, including the law of gestation. Different creations require different gestation periods. Some manifestations appear quickly, others take time to develop. The key is persistent responsibility, regardless of apparent results. When you stay silent and repeat "I am responsible" day after day, regardless of circumstances, something profound begins happening beneath the surface. New neural pathways form. New beliefs take root. New perspectives emerge. New possibilities reveal themselves. These internal shifts may seem subtle at first, but they're the foundation of all external change. Like the foundation of a building, they're not immediately impressive or visible, but without them, nothing substantial can be built. As you continue the practice, you'll begin noticing small external shifts. Opportunities you might have missed before become apparent. Solutions to problems start emerging spontaneously. Relationships begin improving without direct intervention. Synchronicities increase. The right people, resources, and circumstances start appearing at precisely the right moments. These aren't coincidences. They're the natural result of your shifted internal state. They're manifestations of your new identity as someone who takes total responsibility. The pace of these manifestations will accelerate as your embrace of responsibility deepens. What began as a daily affirmation becomes a moment-by-moment awareness. What started as a conscious choice becomes an unconscious default. What initiated as a practice becomes a permanent state of being. And that's when manifestation truly accelerates. When "I am responsible" is no longer something you say, but something you are. The difference between knowing and doing is the difference between dreaming and manifesting. So let's talk about what "I am responsible" looks like in daily action. Tomorrow morning, when you first open your eyes, before reaching for your phone, before letting the world rush in, stay silent. Take 3 deep breaths, then say those words. "I am responsible." Let them settle into your bones. Let them become the foundation of your day. Then carry this foundation into everything you encounter. When traffic slows your journey, instead of cursing the cars or the construction, silently affirm, "I am responsible." Responsible for your timing. Responsible for not planning alternative routes. Responsible for your reaction in this moment. When the project deadline tightens like a vise, instead of blaming your team or circumstances, whisper to yourself, "I am responsible." Responsible for your commitments. Responsible for your resource management. Responsible for solving the problem rather than amplifying it. When your energy crashes in the afternoon, rather than attributing it to age or genetics, remind yourself, "I am responsible." Responsible for what you ate. Responsible for how you've managed stress. Responsible for your sleep patterns the night before. This practice transforms your relationship with reality. Not overnight, but steadily, inevitably, like water reshaping stone. Not through force, but through persistent presence. You'll notice subtle shift first. The problem that once sent you spiraling now becomes a puzzle to solve. The person who once triggered anger now becomes a teacher of patience. The limitation that once defined your boundaries now becomes an invitation to innovation. These perceptual shifts are the first evidence of accelerating manifestation. They signal that your internal landscape is changing, which always precedes external transformation. As you maintain this practice, external changes begin appearing. Small at first, handling a difficult conversation with surprising ease, finding creative solutions where you once saw only obstacles, noticing opportunities invisible to your previous perspective. Honor these manifestations, not with ego that says, look what I accomplished, but with the quiet acknowledgement that this is the natural harvest of seeds you've intentionally planted. The manifestations grow larger with consistent practice. Health improves not through magical thinking, but through responsible choices made day after day. Finances strengthen not through wishful hoping, but through conscious stewardship. Relationships deepen not through manipulating others, but through owning your contributions fully. Throughout this journey, continue returning to those three words. Not as a technique you apply, but as a truth you embody. Not as something separate from you, but as the very core of who you're becoming. Most manifestation efforts fail, not from lack of desire or even lack of action, but from inconsistent identity. People create something wonderful, then unconsciously sabotage it because their identity hasn't expanded to integrate their new reality. They remain small people with big things rather than becoming people whose internal magnitude naturally attracts corresponding circumstances. When you stay silent and repeat, I am responsible, you're upgrading your identity to match your expanding manifestations. You're ensuring that each new level of creation becomes your natural habitat rather than foreign territory your subconscious feels compelled to escape. This process isn't always comfortable. There will be days when saying those three words feels impossible. Days when circumstances seem so clearly caused by others that claiming responsibility feels like accepting blame for things beyond your control. These are your most important moments. These are the crossroads where most people abandon responsibility and return to the familiar territory of blame, excuses, and victimhood. These are also the precise moments where embracing those three words, especially when it feels most difficult, creates the deepest transformation. In those challenging moments, the practice becomes even more essential. Stay silent. Repeat those three words, not because they feel true in that moment, but because speaking them begins making them true. Not because you feel responsible, but because claiming responsibility starts shifting how you feel. This is manifestation at its most powerful. Choosing your stance rather than being defined by circumstances. Creating your reality rather than merely experiencing it. Being cause rather than effect. Most people spend their entire lives as effects. They express whatever emotions arise automatically. They reflect whatever environment surrounds them. They react to whatever happens to them. And in doing so, they remain trapped in cycles of default manifestation, creating variations of what they already have, regardless of whether it serves their highest good. But when you stay silent and repeat, I am responsible, especially during difficult moments, you're choosing to be cause rather than effect. You're deciding to create your reality rather than be created by it. You're authoring your story rather than being written into someone else's. This choice is the cornerstone of conscious manifestation. It's the difference between a life that happens to you and a life you intentionally craft. It's the distinction between drifting with currents and navigating with purpose. And it begins with those three words, repeated in silence, embraced with conviction, and lived with consistency. Consider two gardens planted with identical seeds in identical soil under identical conditions. In the first garden, the gardener plants, then walks away, returning occasionally to hope for growth, to complain about weeds, to wish for rain. In the second garden, the gardener says, I am responsible, and shows up daily, watering when needed, weeding consistently, supporting young plants, harvesting at optimal times. Which garden thrives? Which produces abundant harvests? Which becomes not just a source of nourishment, but a source of joy? The answer reveals itself in the question. Your life is that garden. Your manifestations are its harvest, and your acceptance of responsibility is the difference between occasional growth and sustainable abundance. When you stay silent and repeat, I am responsible, you're making a decision about what kind of gardener you will be. Not just today, not just when conditions are favorable, but every day, regardless of circumstances, because that's what responsibility means. As we conclude, I want to leave you with a vision. Not a fantasy, but a realistic picture of what becomes possible through responsibility-based manifestation. Imagine moving through each day with complete ownership, not burdened by blame, but empowered by authorship. Imagine approaching challenges not with dread, but with calm confidence, knowing that within every problem lies an opportunity for creation. Imagine relating to others, not as threats or saviors, but as fellow creators with whom you're co-authoring experiences. Imagine your health not as something happening to you, but as the natural expression of choices you fully own. Imagine your finances not as mysterious forces beyond control, but as direct reflections of value you choose to create and manage. Imagine your relationships not as emotional roller coasters dependent on others' behavior, but as co-creative partnerships you responsibly nurture. Imagine your entire life not as something you're enduring until something better comes along, but as your masterpiece, the canvas on which you're painting with the full palette of choices available to someone who knows deep in their bones, I am responsible. This isn't wishful thinking. This is what becomes available when you stay silent and repeat those 3 words until they transform from daily affirmation into fundamental identity. The journey begins with a simple choice. Will you take full responsibility for your life exactly as it is right now? Not when circumstances improve, not when others change. Right now, with everything exactly as it is. Will you look at your health, your relationships, your work, your finances, your emotions, your habits, your entire life circumstance, and quietly say, I am responsible? If your answer is yes, you've just taken the first step toward accelerated manifestation. You've planted the seed that will grow into everything you truly desire. But a seed needs consistent nurturing, so tomorrow morning, and the morning after that, and every morning that follows, begin your day with those 3 words. Stay silent, repeat them, feel them, embody them, become them, then watch as manifestation accelerates from possibility to probability to inevitability. Because when you take full responsibility for where you are, you gain full power to choose where you're going. When you own your current reality without reservation, you earn the right to create a new one without limitation. When you embrace those 3 words without exception, you unlock manifestation without restriction. Every time it repeat, I am responsible. And in that silence, listen for what wants to be created through you. Not your ego's wishes or society's expectations, but the authentic desires waiting to manifest through someone courageous enough to claim total ownership of their creative power. Then go create it, one responsible choice at a time. That's how manifestation works. That's how reality transforms. That's how you become the author of your life rather than merely a character in it. Stay silent, repeat those 3 words, and watch as the life you've been waiting for begins manifesting through the person you're choosing to become.